Hi, I'm Mark Elrich, the County Executive of Montgomery County, welcoming you to the Maryland Association of Counties Conduit Street Podcast, the show that discusses the issues and ideas shaping Maryland policy and politics today.
Welcome back to the Conduit Street Podcast. I'm Butchko, and today we are recording from Williamsburg, Virginia at the CSCA conference. We are doing a very special episode today. We have our friends from Virginia as well as Georgia here. Let's do a round of introductions. Joe?
So I'm Joe Lurch, the Director of Local Government Policy for the Virginia Association of Counties.
I'm Keenan Rogers. I'm a lobbyist for ACCG, Association of County Commissioners of Georgia, and my policy areas are transportation and economic development.
Kevin Kinnally from MACO, Maryland Association of Counties. James Hutzler with the Virginia Association of Counties.
Kaylin Day, also with ACCG out of Georgia.
Guys, it is so exciting to be here with you. Before we dive in, what is the CSCA conference and why are we here?
So it's the Conference of Southern County Associations. So going all the way to Florida, all the way up to Maryland, just below the Mason-Dixon, going as far west as Texas, Missouri, Arkansas, that area, Oklahoma. And it's just this group of county associations, state county associations, and we get together once a year to really learn from each other about what's going on. It's definitely a learning experience and a sharing experience.
And we have some folks from outside of that particular region, because don't we have Oregon, Ohio, a couple others coming in because we're doing a big tax day today?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let's dive in now to legislation. So first, let's just start little basis setting. Joe, tell us about Virginia and how that works, because it's very different from Maryland. And then I'm curious to hear how Georgia runs their sessions. So Joe, let's start with you.
Virginia has different sessions each year. So in an even number year after election, we have a 60-day session considered a full session. In the odd number year, we have a 30-day session, which really becomes a 45-day session. They add on another 15 days. And the thing with the even year or the long session, 60 days, that's when you're taking up the introduced budget from the governor. And in this case, it's from the outgoing governor. So the new governor has to deal with this budget. But that's a little bit about the Virginia.
So very tight, very consolidated. And your budgets are biannual. So you're doing a budget every 2 years.
Doing a budget every 2 years, but you're always dealing with the budget because you have your caboose budget where you're making adjustments largely based on revenue projections. I'm sure it's similar in Georgia and Maryland, but you always say, hey, here's our base budget on what we think our revenues are going to be. And everybody's very conservative on what those revenues are going to be. And so you end up with a surplus, which is a good thing to have.
Now, Kaylin, how do you run things in Georgia?
So it is similar to Virginia in that we do have in the beginning of the year a short session, so to speak, of 40 days. But the 40 days are only days that they're actually physically voting in the chamber. So committee days, anything else that might be going on at the Capitol is just not counted. So it runs pretty much second week of January to pretty much first week of April, depending on when I was going to say when Easter falls, but it's really all about the Masters. And so it's funny you use the term caboose budget. I haven't heard that. We call it our amended budget. We have two budgets going on every session. It's the amended for what happened,
So what you're doing is just adjusting what you've already approved from the previous year.
Thank you. I could not find my word.
Yeah.
And then we have the big budget. And this year was kind of interesting with the budget because kind of middle of session, they threw in there they wanted to build a giant mental hospital, and all the other priorities kind of came later in session when budget for us, or OPB, the office that really starts, it works on it in September. So it really was getting flushed out.
You mentioned budget. Obviously in Maryland, we have big budget problem. We're looking at close to $4 billion in the out years in terms of a structural deficit. How are the budgets looking in Virginia and Georgia? Are you all facing the same pressures in the out years or even right now?
I'll start with Virginia. Budget numbers look good right now, and in fact,
those data centers.
Those data center bucks, baby.
Well, it's more than that. I mean, the biggest income in Virginia, or the biggest contribution to the revenues, is the income tax at the state level. And what counties rely on, real estate and property tax. The state actually doesn't have a property tax. So, but, we work together on funding the major things like schools. So the budget's looking good. The governor's actually asked for reforecast. And that came out looking even rosier, and it's come at a critical time because related to data centers, we do not have a budget. They, adjourn, sign, and die without it. They're actually coming into special session later this month. And the big disagreement was the Senate wanted to do away with the sales and use tax exemption for data centers to realize about close to $2 billion annually in the budget. The House rejected it. Part of the debate here is, are we going to be killing the industry, that's provided a lot of Virginia? Are they going to go to other states? And so we're trying to meet to come to an agreement on that.
And what about Georgia? What does your budget look like?
So kind of in a similar situation, although we're doing well. They've been definitely letting everyone know that we have a very large rainy day fund, or somewhere in the tune of like $16 billion. However, the governor did take his beautiful red pen to our budget during veto time. And that he said it was to make up for the sales tax decrease, because it was a really big priority this year in the legislature to make massive cuts to that. And he said we needed to pay for it.
It's fascinating. One of the reasons I love this conference is because you see similarities in policy, but everyone does things a little bit differently. Like you adjourn, sign, and die without the budget. The only thing in Maryland you have to do before you adjourn is pass the budget.
Same in Georgia. That's what floored me. I was like, the one thing they're legally obligated to do is pass the budget.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and we're running up against our deadline because the fiscal year starts July 1st in state and localities. But typically, this happens more regularly than you would think in Virginia because of policy differences and really just agreeing on how much revenue is there and where you're taking it from. And we typically come to an agreement before we hit July 1st. And we're hoping that as well this year.
So let's do a little bit of a round robin now. Session just ended. We all have the battle scars to prove it. So let's talk about the big bills that we worked with. We'll start with you, Keegan.
Perfect. So in Georgia, the song of the season was the property tax relief. And so that kind of relates to economic development, which was my area of expertise. And kind of one of the big bills that I was working on is this franchise fees issue, where the counties are unable to collect fees that utilities are paying cities and counties to use their public rights of way by running the power lines through it. So the appetite was there because, again, this is tens of millions of dollars that cities are just simply able to collect that counties aren't. And it's just by virtue of legislation. Counties are an extension of the legislative branch, and all we have to do is just get granted approval. But there's a lot of inner workings in terms of collection process and distribution, and nobody's kind of ever cracked this open and looked under the hood of it. So that's what we really wanted to do. Our members really, this was a top 3 priority for them. So we worked with the House exponentially because they were absolute warriors for us. And we drafted some bills, and again, data centers are the talk of the town. So we drafted some bills that tried to kind of take a piece of that pie as well. The legislature, we got a few hearings on it. They realized this is a bigger issue than just having 1 or 2 hearings. So in what I would like to call a win for us, we got it pushed to a study committee over the summer, where we can really sit down and crack it open and take a look at how much money is there, who kind of controls these rights of way, who's actually using most of them, and how, first and foremost, how those funds get distributed. So,
Kayla, what about you? What else is going on in Georgia?
So Keenan's absolutely right that the property tax fight took a lot of our brainwave, but we also had our eyes on plenty of other things. There's been a huge narrative that maybe is growing across the country, I could say, about local government standing in the way of affordable housing. And so that's shown up in Georgia in a multitude of ways. It did start with trying to take on investor own. In Georgia, around Atlanta, there is a huge percentage of the metro counties that are largely bought up and owned by out-of-state investors. And so there's been bipartisan pushes to take some limitations to that, but we've also seen bipartisan pushes to make major reforms to our permitting process. So in Georgia, we have land disturbance permits, which I imagine other states have similar permits under the Erosion and Sedimentation Act. And long story short, it said that we had 45 days to issue a permit. Did not matter how complex, how big it was. Same thing for a single family house as a data center. And if we did not issue it within that time or if it was denied, excuse me, then you have 14 days. And on that 14th day, no matter what, it is automatically approved. We worked really hard on that bill. It became a Senate caucus priority. And we did a lot of back and forth on that. Thankfully, we were able to maneuver with them to say that they weren't going to waive our sovereign immunity over these things. They weren't going to make us fully reimburse the permitting fees on it. But that's one that's likely going to come back up next year.
But a 14-day shot clock, automatic approval, that just sounds dangerous no matter what's going on the ground, the local condition. I mean, the folks listen to this in Maryland, it's a trope, but no one size fits all. And you're just going to stamp it. I mean, people are going to live here, work here, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was not really getting through to folks, this came from our, home builder associations and stuff, which I understand their frustrations around, delays in permitting. However, in Georgia, we often have to, especially with complex projects, have to get the state involved. Certain lakes, you got to get the Army Corps of Engineers involved. Yes, right. Absolutely. And so while they look to punish the locals and have them holding the bag, it's quite often the state that underfunds those agencies and they sit on
or requires those reviews and has the regulations.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're like, okay, maybe we can work with this, but y'all have got to hold up on your end too. So I hope that continues to be a balanced conversation.
So let's shift to Virginia now. James, PFAS.
Yes, sir.
What is it? What's going on?
First of all, what is PFAS?
Yeah, what is it?
My colleague Joe's been really working on his pronunciation.
Per and polyfluoral alkyl substances.
Yeah, right.
Is that right?
Yeah. It sounded good. We don't know if it's right. But
yeah. I don't know what it means. Say it 10 times fast.
It's abundant.
Yeah.
And for, I guess it's a little refresher, PFAS are forever chemicals. These are found in things like cosmetics, firefighting foam, rugs, everywhere. They're everywhere in the environment. They're in the water, they're in our bodies. And unfortunately, they have been linked to diseases and causing cancer and things of that nature. There's a big compromise bill that we work on in Virginia. It's a whole new regulatory structure that's basically being put in place. So after a couple months of testing beginning next year, this is wastewater associations and local governments going to have to be testing their biosolids and per the amount of micrograms, not to get too sciencey, but the amount of micrograms per kilogram of PFAS in your biosolids samples and tests, then there's like a tiered structure which would limit application on land, or if there's too many PFAS in your biosolids, you would then have to landfill or incinerate them, which unfortunately will impact local governments' budgets a little bit. But the compromise we've worked out with our manufacturing sector, with our wastewater authorities, with other local governments, is that we're all trying to lower the prevalence of these chemicals in our environment. And we believe that this bill is the best way forward.
With PFAS, we dealt with this in Maryland. I think every state's going to deal with this if they haven't. I kind of take umbrage with, it kind of seems like the opioid epidemic, right? Like there are states suing these manufacturers all over the place, but it seems to me like we're jumping the gun. I know you said it's a little bit of an impact on budgets, but when it comes to mitigating, I'm very hopeful that the producers are held responsible and it's not the local governments on the hook for this stuff because, like you said, they're everywhere. So I'm really interested in how that plays out, especially with mitigation.
And a lot of the conversations we have with legislatures across Virginia is that, local wastewater authorities and wastewater agencies are passive receivers of these chemicals.
Absolutely.
Localities are not the ones producing them. They hand in the waste stream. They get ran through our wastewater agencies. And so we are just, we're being held responsible right now to clean them up. And yes, hopefully that we can start pinpointing this at the source instead of.
And we're also not the ones that have made billions upon billions upon billions of dollars off this stuff, and then we're asked to clean it up. It just sounds backwards. And so this is a conversation we had in Maryland that's going to, I'm sure, continue.
Well, speaking of the conversation in Maryland, the interesting policy here is that Maryland and Virginia were actually running tandem kind of political tracks here. When we were debating it in our General Assembly session, the Virginia legislature was doing it. I actually saw the senators coordinating.
Yeah.
There's a group that both of our associations, VACO and MACO, work with called Aqualaw, and they have a group that represents the actual infrastructure providers. So we were really close in this entire thing, that 25 to 50 and 50 threshold. It's really a framework that will work kind of on both ends of the Potomac. One thing I just want to provide a little background. We use the term biosolids. What is it? Why does this matter? So biosolids, if you're a pro-environmentalist, if you're, want effective government services, they're actually used. They're the waste effluent from our wastewater treatment facilities, but they're used as a really good fertilizer. And so now that we have these chemicals in this fertilizer, it's getting into the food supply. So if you're wondering what that term is and how it fits in, that's really where it comes from. Joe, let's go to you next.
Sure. Housing, George talks about, it's really part of the whole affordability discussion at the national level, state and local level. We have lots of bills related to that, related to energy, other things, drug prices. But in the housing arena, we had quite a few bills. And I'd say a large chunk of those had to do with land use controls and reducing barriers at the local level. And there's always going to be
fault, right? It's all our fault.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because we're not permitting enough.
Right.
And so that's that tension, right? And as we talked about earlier, the state requires us to do a lot of things on environmental review, transportation, things of that nature. So I want to focus on basically 3 bills, and I'll try to keep it short. But the first bill that we saw come through and was really interesting, and I think it's very positive, and we ended up not taking a position on it, but we helped shape the bill. Currently in Virginia, until July 1st of this year, counties could not prohibit manufactured homes within agricultural zoned areas, but they could in other areas. Mm-hmm. And so this bill had been a long time coming to basically say anywhere you can build a single family home, you should be able to build a manufactured home. And really, the quality of manufactured homes, they're really similar to modular.
Oh, yeah, almost identical.
So when you say manufactured, you're not talking about traditionally what people think of as trailers and quote unquote trailer parks, right? That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're talking about new HUD standard things. Right. That really the only difference between it and a similarly constructed modular home is one is on a chassis. Yeah. And we have plants in Virginia that make these. It's really fascinating to go there. So it's cheaper, number one. It's actually environmentally more friendly because all the waste is controlled in the construction on the site.
Mm-hmm. These are the prefab houses, right?
Yeah.
That I'm hearing? Okay.
Yeah. And they're done to a very good quality. And in fact, one of the manufacturers now does a duplex model of these, which has now been approved by the HUD for construction. And how we help shape that is we wanted to make sure that these were for newer construction and that it was also tied to the property and not what we call like chattel, like a personal property, because you don't really get any value accumulated or any property value, but tying it to the property. So we think that's really positive. There's another bill that did not pass that we were actually involved in our opposition. And essentially what this bill said was any land that's zoned commercial or mixed use, that multifamily could be a by right use. It was trying to get into these mixed use, mandating mixed use development. Why it was a problem for our members is in Virginia, we don't have impact fees. All we have is conditional zoning. And through a conditional rezoning, if somebody wants to do something like this, we can get some payments through what's known as a proffer system. So it's kind of like impact fees.
I love that old English word,
Exactly.
Proffer.
Yeah,
Joe, really quick, what is a proffer?
A proffer is just, it's kind of an interesting term. And what it refers to is that a locality can't require it of the developer. So the developer proffers that I will pay this fee to ameliorate the cost of, to schools, water,
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Payment in lieu of taxes. Payment limit, kind of an impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the problem we had with the bill is that it was upzoning that land, and we wouldn't be able to get that. So the bill didn't make it through, but we think it might lead to a productive off-season discussion. Maybe we should be looking at impact fees, which has been a standard in our platform to have. They came close in 2008 to passing it in Virginia in lieu of the conditional zoning as it proffers. And why that I think would be a great tool is then localities may proactively say, you know what, we're going to upzone this area, allow for this mixed use in this area or more density. And then the developers come in and it's kind of, it's easy for them to understand. We know what's expected of us and we're not like negotiating on what the price should be.
Is every locality in Virginia allowed to have the proffer?
Every locality has conditional zonings, but proffers is tied to kind of growth rates. So only certain localities have that. And we're kind of limited on what can be negotiated in those unless the developers going to waive their rights on what they might want to profit.
And when people hear Virginia doesn't have an impact fee, they think, oh my god, like how could you possibly survive? It's important to remember too that all of these states have different revenue systems, and you may have some revenue authority that Maryland doesn't have, vice versa. Georgia's saying sales tax, right? So in Maryland, we don't have a local sales tax. In other states, they might. So it's all a balancing act. But on impact fees, I think the development community comes to us and they say, well, we'll gladly pay it. Now it's changed a little bit because now it seems like they have a cash flow problem. It's a separate problem. So in Maryland, we did some stuff there, but traditionally, it seems like they've been willing to come to the table and, work it out and figure out how to build the infrastructure that comes along with the housing or any other project. Right?
Yeah. And the last bill I'll talk about, because it may be coming to other states, and it has to other states. It's called Faith in Housing Bill, or Faith in Housing Law, which will become effective. And essentially what this says is if you're a religious organization or property tax exempt nonprofit, you can by right, regardless of what your zoning is, do house an affordable housing. It is tied to affordable housing, which is it's key to understand. And there's certain conditions. It needs to be within a certain distance of water and sewer available. There's actually a sunset provision to it, so it would expire, I think, in 2030 or 2031, just to see how this works. Right. Quite frankly, a lot of our members are working with churches, synagogues, mosques. If they have unused or unutilized property and they want to address through their mission of providing affordable housing, we'll work with them, and we have in certain areas. I think they're just growing restless, some of the advocates, and thinking we don't want to have to go through this process. And so, this is what they've come up with. It is an interesting, though, kind of model, because if you think about it, you could have two properties similarly zoned, say they're both R1, right? And by the virtue of ownership, who you are as the owner, you get more development rights. It
doesn't sound fair.
It doesn't sound fair. But we'll see how that goes. I mean, we always encourage our members. I mean, it probably is a good time to reach out to those communities anyway within your jurisdiction, say, and maybe it's not even housing. Maybe it's an adult daycare center. Maybe it's pickleball courts. Yeah. Everybody needs pickleball.
But there's a resource there.
Yeah, pickleball. Yeah, that's right.
So I think that the interesting thing and why I love this conference is that you can see the similarities and differences. And there's a lot of similarities. Two of the things that you brought up, Joe, with the modular and the faith housing, we actually did that in 2024 as part of our governor's first big housing bill. So we've done that already. And then the debate about by right residential and commercial areas, that was one of the biggest bills of the session. It also didn't pass in Maryland, but these debates that we're having on housing are just huge and permeating everything.
Yeah. And of course, there's at the federal level, there's the Housing Production Act, which looks like it's going to pass. So
yeah,
we'll see how that affects.
Yeah. So actually on the topic of housing, I'll go next. So this was the session of housing for us. It was really big. Actually, if you're doing the math, it's the third session in the row of housing because it's just such a big issue. And so we had the Housing Certainty Act. It was one of the governor's keynote bills. It did two major things. First, it moved Maryland from an early vesting state to a late vesting state. Reverse that. It removed us from a late vesting state to an early vesting state. And what that basically means is when your application comes in, it's evaluated based on the standards at the time of the application submittal. So previously, if there was a change in a community and we wanted to update a regulation, we can apply that regulation to projects that haven't been built yet. That authority is now gone. The other thing is we moved the timing of impact fees and when they're paid. And so prior to this bill, we can charge impact fees earlier in the project. Kevin before referenced cash flow problems. Now we can only charge the impact fee as a precondition to a use and occupancy permit, which is the very last step.
Yeah, and there's something similar with the proper system in Virginia. Typically, it's like maybe a certain number of certificates of occupancy are issued for this development, and then you collect. So maybe in stages that you collect that, not all at once.
In Georgia, you're not automatically allowed to get impact fees. You actually have to go through not just adopting an ordinance, but a much longer process with one of our agencies. And I recently got the list and was so surprised to see how few counties are actually getting the impact fees.
But just because it jumps through so many hoops, or
it does, and we do have a lot of rural. We have 159 counties in Georgia. A good deal of them very rural and maybe have not seen the development boom that has caused them to jump on it. But also, they get in situations where when it does come, then you don't have anything to pay. But
And before I go, I was interested to learn, as we always learn a lot of this conference, that Georgia is now the hotspot for data centers. right? Like I didn't realize like how fast you were jumping up the list in terms of like, we know Virginia, everybody gets it. We have the extension board running across Maryland that's got power to data centers in Virginia. We get it. But I didn't realize that Georgia was like, really up high on the list.
Yeah, we're really growing. We expect over 100% increase in terms of these projects that we have lined up. And Meta is there, Google's in Atlanta. It's a big hub for everything. And the city spans out wide. And so the infrastructure is there. And that's why it's quite enticing. We are currently giving $700 million in tax credits to these data centers. And so that got cracked open, and they're taking a look at that, last session. But also in Georgia, we produce a lot of pulp, and we're big on timber here. However, mills are closing left and right because these companies are not seeing, profit on them. So they have all this infrastructure. They have all these water pipes. They still have the power that's run to these plants. They are a little more rural than where everybody's used to, kind of being closer to Atlanta. So we are seeing a shift to kind of more rural Georgia with these data centers. But if they have a mill that used to be there with the infrastructure right there for picking, as long as the parameters are in place, the problem is these data centers can come in and just kind of steamboat everybody. And so now we're working with our members to make sure that the proper policies are in place so that we can both have, a mutually beneficial relationship.
So I just want to jump in here because we're talking about data centers. Shameless plug. Longtime listeners of Conduit Street will know that data centers are a big deal. Joe and I actually just dropped an episode this week of our mini series, The Briefing Room, where we actually talk about data centers in Maryland and in Virginia. This is just an issue. I think we were just talking up here. How many states we got here? 13, 14 states. Data centers are top of mind for everybody. Go ahead and listen to that episode.
And I do have an errata on that. I said $2 million worth in tax abatement. It was $2 billion, but we already
$2 billion.
Yeah, $2 billion.
Capital B, baby.
Yeah.
Data center money.
I heard a stat this morning that collectively in the U.S., more money is going to be spent on data centers than on surface transportation over the next few, which is bananas. That's what it's about. Like how much investment is going on with data centers. So there's a ton of money behind it, a lot of lobbyists behind it, big push. So it's
and we're yet for AI firms to turn profit. So
right.
Yeah.
Waiting.
Yeah.
They're going to go with these IPOs. We'll see.
All right, Kevin, take us home. Finish us off.
Okay. Well, I was inspired this morning by the NACO executive director, Matt Chase, who came down, thankfully, to this meeting and talked about not forgetting about emergency managers, election folks, all these people on the front lines who are the backbone of county government and deliver these services face to face. So in Maryland, we had several bills trying to deal with not only elections, but also with emergency management. Our listeners know that in Western Maryland, we had a big flood. We were denied disaster relief from FEMA and then from the president. So Maryland, we set up a separate fund to kind of get the money out the door quickly for disasters that don't reach that federal threshold, but still cause problems in communities. We had a tornado in Annapolis that kind of inspired this. We've taken that fund and used it to now try and backfill to make sure that when we do have a disaster and FEMA doesn't show up, there's at least some money there. No state can do this by themselves, obviously. I think we've worked with other states, Virginia, mutual aid, trying to figure out a path here. But I'm really worried about not only emergency managers, but election folks with this election coming. Obviously, there's a lot going on. So I think we were successful in a few of those bills, more work to do, but really big shout out to all those people doing this work right now under really tough circumstances with all the narratives going on out there and the fake news and whatnot. So shout out to them, and we're proud to support them, especially through legislation and trying to get stuff settled so that they can do their jobs effectively and keep things safe. Everybody can vote. It's fair and accurate, and then emergency management that we can actually help people when they need help. And that's what they do.
You don't want to be in a situation when you call 911 and you get put on hold.
Absolutely.
And that does happen in Georgia currently. So, yeah.
So I think this is a great place to leave it. And I just have to say, I love these conferences. I love having you guys on this podcast. It really shows you that no matter what part of the country you're in, it's just about public service and serving the people that we represent. I think this displays that beautifully. So thank you to our friends from Virginia, from Georgia for coming on the call.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.